Hey, Patrick Johnston. I'm Paul Chapman. Let me just start with a little bit of a ramble. So we occasionally get feedback from readers, and had a couple of things lately saying, you know, um, why are you using words like crisis to describe the Canucks? With what's going on in Abbotsford and the floods and everything, that's awfully insensitive. You need to use your language better. And this to me, like, it kind of struck a nerve. Number one, like, let's not be too literal. And yes, sports metaphors get overused and overwrought
Yeah,
all the time.
war and
Uh,
battle and all that. Yeah.
yeah, and we never really want to offend anyone, particularly people who are going through harder times. But I will say this: unfortunately, with everything that's been going on in our world, from COVID, and now we're hearing new variants, and the
Oh God.
weather, and people losing property, and all this other stuff, you can't get around the province, supply chain issues, you're not allowed to get gas, all this stuff. Sports is often referred to as the toy department because it takes your mind off that. If you have to deal with this, pardon my language, shit every day, then for 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 45 minutes, you can sit down and
Yeah,
forget
yeah.
about it. The Canucks can't even give that to people now. And that's what's frustrating me. And I have to say, while we're talking about Abbotsford, thank you to Woody's RV, Western Canada's largest RV dealer. They've stepped up to sponsor our Canuck Report, our newsletter. Sign up at theprovince.com, vancouversun.com to get all our content, get these videos. Woody's very graciously have stepped up to do this. They've donated tens of thousands of dollars, maybe even over $100,000 now to flood victims there in Abbotsford. Check them out, woodiesrv.com. Nice to have a sponsor out there. I would push you to go out and check out their showroom on Marshall Road, but I'm not sure you can get to it yet.
Right.
So check them out online if
Yeah.
you're in that business. So thank you to Woody's. But Patrick, let's get right to it now after I've wasted all this time.
Well, hold
What,
on. Let,
what
let
the
me
hell
let
is
me
going on?
well, let me get back to this crisis question because um, I've had a couple emails. One was kinder than the other. After I had the kind one, um,
Get kind emails? I never do.
I do actually. I get some nice emails from readers. Uh, Including the father of our late colleague, or not late colleague, former colleague Ray Farnott. I got Ray Farnott's dad emailing me about the state of the Canucks. But no, I had an email talking about the crisis. So I went out on Twitter and I said, you know what? Okay, maybe crisis is hyperbolic. Maybe that's a fair point. So what should we be saying instead? Paul, I got 120 replies.
Tire fire? Dumpster fire?
Hopeless mess debacle. I did actually have someone send me a GIF of a tire fire, a fairy tale, a trash can inferno of despair,
Inferno
failure
of
in
despair. I like that.
trash can failure, yeah, trash can inferno of despair, failure, incompetence, fiasco, flop. Uh, they sent me the clip from Semi Pro for a shit sandwich, fiasco, snafu. Like it just was incredible. A comedic farce and organizational ineptitude,
Yeah.
dysfunctional. Yeah, I mean, it's just it is striking to me. We're always careful, I think, with social media to sort of lend too much weight to it because it is always a very specific set of or type of person that tends to engage in those ways. But the reaction we're hearing in like I said, an email, uh, on the various broadcast platforms that we have now. Um, you look everywhere you look, it's just frustration, frustration, frustration. It's been 8 years, basically, or 7 years that this is the eighth season, 7 years that essentially the Jim Benning era, partly obviously with Trevor Linden, and that you know there's almost never been a step forward. They've had some decent first round picks in the draft, but other than that, they have not been very good at signing free agents. There have been, really only a couple trades you can really say where have actually been useful. And even the most recent one where you picked up Connor Garland and you picked up Oliver Ekman-Larsson, it's one of those ones, well, what is it actually in the big picture? How does that actually, help the forward progress of the of the sort of ambition, don't even use the word plan, but the ambition, which should be to win the Stanley Cup. Connor Garland is a great forward and has been a great player for this team, and OEL he's been fine for this team. But go back to what I was talking about before. In the end, we're talking about what's a more appropriate word than crisis, if crisis is inappropriate. That in the end is the discussion. So all the stuff inside of it is immaterial. That this isn't a team that anyone suggests. I mean, there's no way they're going to make the playoffs this year unless they go on some incredible run, which seems so far from reality, that it's just kind of it is inconceivable. They're not going to make the playoffs. So what are you doing here? What is going to happen next? You've got this Brock Besser question. You've got, what are you going to do with your older forwards like Bo Horvat and JT Miller? What are you going to do with Tyler Myers? What are you going to do? What is the plan here? How are you actually going to prove?
Well, Patrick, look,
your star wants to see winning. You're not winning.
Yeah. So, well, we'll get to that part in a second. But we know what's happening here, unless the ownership is going to severely veer off what they have from this point. When you talk about their older players, they're not going to sell them and collapse to have 4 first rounders in within a 2-year span. That's not been the what this family wants. This family wants playoff revenue every year. Unfortunately, they've been chasing it, and the only year they got there really was the year that they couldn't sell tickets and reap the windfall, which is comical in and of itself. But the idea that they would now have a change of mindset and say, no, we're willing to go another 3 years out of the playoffs, get rid of some veteran assets to bring in picks, and then really hope to compete in 2 to 4 years. Like that to me is the most damaging thing. Ian McIntyre had actually very astute observation that most of their off-season moves have kind of worked out. They haven't been dreadful. Ekman-Larsson's been fine. Garland's been good. Even you look at swapping out Holtby for Halak, that's not really killed them. But what will kill them down the road is they put the chips in the middle of the table to make the playoffs this year, compete and get down that road and accelerate whatever stage of the rebuild, the non-rebuild rebuild that they were at, and yet they're farther away. And the last 2 years, there are no first-round picks now. Coming from the last 2 years that you can integrate into the team. So yes, there's a couple of nice second-round rounders in there that may progress, but we're not talking about impact players. I wanted to ask you. You re-signed Travis Green in the offseason, and now you look, everyone's saying like he's lost the room, irretrievable, you have to get rid of him. Again, I'm not sure that money would be something that'd be looking at spending. Elias Pettersson signed him to a contract. A lot of people wanted more than 3 years. They got him to 3 years. Looks like a shell of the player that he was before. What is going on there to the best of your knowledge? Like why have so many things gone wrong?
I mean, I think part of it is I think simply that the defense isn't good enough. And this is one of the things, like, you can say, okay, sure, that trade worked out okay, but like Tucker Pullman hasn't worked out. Jason Dickinson hasn't worked out. Those are 2 other big moves from the offseason that haven't proven terribly useful. You're still stuck on a lack of depth. In your defense core, like Brad Hunt, who's supposed to be a guy that you can rely on, they don't even want to dress. Like, the problem more than anything is that you can't play a tempo game. I asked Travis Green this earlier this week. I said, are you playing? You guys, we used to talk about you guys playing fast. Are you playing fast enough? And he basically said no. He said there's, he essentially implied that if we are playing well, it's because we're playing fast, and that he believes his team still could play fast. But the fundamental issue is that they can't move the puck. And even Ekman-Larsson has been guilty of this at times. Like, of that grouping, like I said, overall, he's been fine. But, he's a guy that shouldn't be hitting guys in the feet, and yet he hits guys in the feet. So is that just simply new players not used to sort of the kind of, fine tuning that you need, that sometimes is an issue when you're coming from, when you're joining a new team? The issue is, in the end, that this team makes too many mistakes. They don't score enough to survive those mistakes. And so whatever good moves they might have made, there were some, like, the Ekman-Larsson Garland trade in isolation was a good bet. Garland's been a good player for them. But in the end, they don't score enough. You just, we're recording this on Friday, but you look at the team they're playing tonight. The Columbus Blue Jackets are not anybody's idea of a perfect team, but at least they can score and they have a direction going forward. And they can move the puck. They're making things happen. They're scoring more than 3 goals a game, like 3.5 goals a game almost. The Canucks are scoring like 2.5 goals a game, and you're just not going to win in a league where the average game goes something like 3-2. You're just not going to win that often if you're only scoring sort of half the goals in a game. It's just a roll of the dice. That's not where you're going to end up. It just, in the end, it comes back to roster construction. It comes back to that sort of year in, year out change of plan, hoping maybe it'll work this year, and that idea that somehow hope is going to work. Hope is not a plan. You don't need a 5-year plan. You don't need a 4-year plan, but you need to understand, how are we going to be better than last year? How are we going to be better next year than we were this year? Going on. And there's just never been any concept of that. It's just been this sort of idea, well, we built a good team and that's it, isn't it? That's just not a rationale.
You may want more goals from your blue line. You may want more goals from your third line. You may want more goals from your captain. But honestly, Patrick, I don't believe this team can go anywhere if they don't get more goals from Elias Pettersson and then secondarily Brock Besser. To your best guess, is this just confidence? Is it attitude? Is it lingering physical issues? Is it equipment based? Is it a coaching system? Is it a disconnect? Guy looks miserable. You're not even getting the death glare anymore, for God's sake. Your best guess, what is wrong there? Would a coaching change fix it? And, what do you expect at season's end with him?
The death glare, I think, on its own speaks to the lack of confidence he has. He's talked about that. I think that is part of the story here. It's a tough one to judge. It's one of those ones where there is, this is the hard part about us not in the end being able to go in the room, which, I think still is a safe and appropriate approach. But it is one of those ones where, in the before times, you just kind of sit down and you quietly say, hey, you might throw a couple questions at him that aren't for publication, that are just to help you understand what's happening. And, so part of me wonders if, I've said this elsewhere, but I wonder how hard last year. I mean, last year was hard on everybody, right? Like let's be clear on that. But this is a guy that he's a bit of a lone wolf. And, when you're essentially mostly expected to be spending time at home when you're not at the rink, that can be hard. I don't know, what his sort of personal relationships are like, whether he's seeing anyone or anything like that. But that kind of, we just imagine any of us and how hard last year was. And I can only imagine how hard it was for a lot of people who were single. And then you sort of look at the sort of the professional constrictions that were put on them. And then he had a terrible start to the season. So, he'd struggled in a way that he'd never struggled before. So that's one part of the snowball. Then he gets hurt, can't play. The only thing that he really knows, like I said, that adds on. Then you have all the sort of other stuff, just real life, didn't go home, made a choice to stay here. I think he's admitted he probably made some poor choices in terms of how he handled sort of his promotional aspect of his life, so there's all that. And so that comes into the season, and then he can't figure it out. And now it just only gets worse. And so, I think confidence is a huge part of it. There are people that have suggested to me that essentially the kind of duties and responsibilities that they're asking, like, systems aren't that complicated in terms of the big picture, but it is interesting. Every time you talk to one of these guys, they join the team and they say, well, you have to get used to the system. And I don't think they mean the system. I think essentially the assignments that, different teams are going to assign different roles to different players. And, the optimal one is you figure out what your players are best at and you assign them based on that. Part of me wonders if there's a misalignment there, if essentially what they're asking him to do in terms of sort of the role that you play in a breakout or whatever, is proving to be a problem. That said, I come back again, he's a guy that wants the puck on his stick. If he doesn't have the puck on his stick, he usually tries to go get it. But if it's, stuck in the corner and he's covering the guy in front of the net, it's not like he's going to be able to go get it. I think it's a whole bunch of things coming together that really just tie into the fact this team hasn't been good enough. And, he hasn't been able to take his game to the next level, which is a worrying thing because a guy of his stature, of his talent, is the kind of guy, Bo Horvat's been trying to do it. He's been trying to pull his team forward and make it happen. I think JT Miller has been doing that many nights as well. He hasn't been perfect a lot of the time, but, you saw it the other night. He certainly was trying to do that. But Pettersson has not been able to do that, and to the point where now he was basically benched at the end of the last game. He barely played in the third period and was playing with, Juho Lammikko and Alex Chason. Like just a bizarre situation for him to be in. It's a bunch of things I think all at once, and I'm sure if in his position, everything feels like everything's crashing around on him, and you can't even figure out where to start from to make things better.
Yeah. So run through some scenarios here. Fire the GM. Unless you're then going to make a blockbuster trade, that's not really going to impact the immediate results at the very least. May change the culture a little bit, but not sure about that. Fire the coach, and you can do lots of different things with different players, different systems, different styles. More offensive, more defensive, whatever that may be.
Right.
But there's going to be an adjustment period. They call it a dead cat bounce sometimes. That you might get a little bit of juice initially, but does it really solve things long term? Make a trade. Well, you're trading from a position of weakness now.
Right.
If you're trying to rebuild on the fly and get a ransom for Pettersson or Horvat or whoever, I'm not sure you can. And if you can, I'm not sure this GM is the guy to do it. So where do you think this goes from here? All three happen? None of them happen? Patience right off this season, address it in the offseason? Or are we going to see a firing of either or a big trade?
Well, that's the thing. If you are making a big move in management, which I think everyone here thinks is going to happen sooner rather than later, I just don't see there being a quick fix here. In the end, the construction of the roster is what it is. All the projection models had them being a roughly mid 80-point team. I don't think they're on pace for 57 points. I don't think they're a 57-point team, but they're not going to be, they're not going to be a 95-point team, which is, give or take what you need to be in the playoffs. So then where are you at? I mean, I think you just got to blow. I really think you're going to have to blow this all up. And that's the change that changing your general manager inevitably leads to. I don't think there's I don't think this, to quote Jim Benning, I don't think this is one you can turn around quickly. I think it's going to take drastic change. And I think you have to hire someone who understands that. And I think ownership needs to understand that. I don't think this is something you can fix and all of a sudden kind of, maybe we'll pick up a couple wins here and there. Like the reality is that this hasn't worked and you need to start fresh.
All right. Well, that's great stuff, Patrick. We'll leave it there. I know we got a game coming up. Let's hope that the Canucks can get on a bit of a roll and at least create the debate, because if it keeps going this way, it's not sure too many people are going to be interested. Want to thank Woody's RV again, woodysrv.com. Go check them out. They've done some great work out in the Valley. And once the roads open up, you might just want to get away for a while. Go on a road trip to Seattle, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah. Stay safe, folks.